It's GCSE day and lots of happy 16-year-olds because, of course, rather like the A-levels a couple of days back, the GCSE grades are much better than they were before. A lot more students getting A's and A stars than we saw a couple of years ago. But something interesting is happening, and we saw it with the A-level results, and we're now seeing it with the GCSE results. And it's this: the gap between the levels of attainment in the private school sector and the state school sector has got bigger and bigger. Interestingly, also, the gap between boys and girls is getting bigger. It seems that boys do quite well under the pressure of one exam, but don't do very well when boys are asked to be diligent over long periods of time. Girls appear to be much better at that form of learning and that form of testing. But the real divide, the big divide that really exists, is between the private schools and between the state schools. And some of the percentages are amazing. I mean, at the independent schools today, those getting grade 7 and above was 60%. For some secondary comprehensives, it was 28%. That is a very big gap. I have a bit of a theory as to why this has happened and what it might mean for education going on from here. But before I expound that, let me get to you, Steve Chalk. He's the founder of the Oasis Academy Trust, which represents 53 academy schools across England. Steve, thank you for joining us here on GB News.
Thank you, Nigel.
You see, it seems to me, Steve, that in too many cases, we've seen kids who've been let down in lockdown. There were too many. I mean, this is my view, and if I'm wrong, you tell me. But it seems to me that in the private sector, very quickly, they adapted to online learning, to a normal school day, being conducted from the kitchen room table or the kid's bedroom or whatever it was, and that they kind of had to do that because they're charging parents very high fees, and if they hadn't done that, I suspect people wouldn't have paid. But it does seem to me, and I'm saying this through family experience, it does seem to me that there were quite large sectors of state education that took months to get organised, and that left the children in state schools disadvantaged in a very big way compared to the private schools. Steve, that's what I think of it. Please tell me how you see this.
Well, Nigel, I agree with you. I think, however, there were two disparities, two gaps. There was the gap that you've talked about, the gap between the independent sector and the state sector, which, as you say, is increasing. But then there was another gap within the state sector. And the gap was between those kids, those students who've done well, and those students who, as Ofqual, the regulator themselves said, those students who performed more poorly than others, and they pulled out three categories. They said black students, students on free school meals, and students from areas of homes of high deprivation.
Yeah.
So it plays in, Nigel, to exactly what you're saying. It's the kids that were well equipped, the kids that had the broadband, the space, the safety, the support, the peace, and it's the kids that didn't enjoy any of those things. And of course, there are many middle-class kids in the state system, whereas they didn't always have the support that the independent sector can afford. Very often, they had support from their family and their friends. Their parents were able to work at home. They live in houses with good, strong broadband connection. But then there were those who were poor at the other end of the scale, and they really suffered.
I guess, at the poor end of the scale, I guess some youngsters may not have even had access to laptops. There was a campaign, wasn't there, by national newspapers to try and raise money to get laptops for kids who do come from poor backgrounds. But Steve, we've always had a private sector and a public sector, but it just seems to me that those that have got money will increasingly want to send their kids through private education as a result of this pandemic. And that's fine. In a free country, if the private sector expands as a result of this, which I believe it will, then that's fine. And I think the sort of Jeremy Corbyn approach that you effectively would make it impossible for private schools to survive is crazy. If you've got a part of a system that is working, let them get on with it. But what do we do? What do we do to give bright young kids in the state sector every opportunity to achieve their best? I mean, and it may be an old-fashioned idea, but it seemed to me that grammar schools did give that opportunity. Now, you know, you're running academies. I presume you have streaming within those academies.
Yeah, yes, we do. What I would say about this, Nigel, is this. The schools that really struggle within the state sector are schools that were out there on their own. So Oasis, we have 53 schools. We have 30,000 plus students, and we work as a collective. We work as a whole. So we were able to respond quickly. We were able to get lessons online, for instance. We were able to get devices out to all of our students around the country. In fact, we purchased 33,000 iPads from Apple. They told us it was the biggest ever educational rollout they've been involved in. But because we got scale, we were able to organise. We don't have more money, but using our budgets creatively and thinking about investing now in something that gave everybody equity in their home and creating supplying dongles for our students who didn't have broadband or adequate broadband, we were able to do that. So we were able to compensate, if you like, for the fact that we don't have the luxury of the cash that the independent sector has, but we had the size to create savings of scale. If you were a local authority school on your own, a small primary school or secondary school on your own, you've got brilliant staff, totally committed, but they just don't have the infrastructure or the capacity to respond quickly. And I think that's what happened.
So do I. I agree with that entirely. Steve, thank you very much indeed for coming on and joining this debate. Thank you.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.